Title: The Office with No Clocks. I never expected to land a job like this. I mean, who does? It all started with a plain envelope. No return address. Just my name and a small wax seal in the corner that looked oddly like a snail. Inside, a single piece of thick, cream-colored paper with typed instructions. Report to 314 Dandelion Lane, Tuesday at 8:11 a.m. Dress comfortably. No resumes. No questions. I almost threw it out. Thought it was a prank. But something about the paper. It smelled faintly of lavender and old books. I was between jobs anyway, nothing to lose. Tuesday morning, I arrived at the address, which was more garden than building. Vines draped over what looked like an old Victorian house tucked between two glass office towers, like a secret court between centuries. A tiny brass plaque by the door simply said, "Third floor." Inside, the air was warm, like a library, like sunlight through cotton. There was no receptionist, no sign-in sheet, just a spiral staircase with steps that creaked politely as I climbed. The third floor opened into a room filled with mismatched desks, antique filing cabinets, and potted plants, so many plants. A fern with a name tag, Hugo, greeted me from the corner. No one seemed in a rush. People in slippers and oversized sweaters typed away at vintage typewriters or read files under green-shaded lamps. It looked more like a cozy book club than a workplace. A tall man in suspenders handed me a cup of tea without saying a word. The tea tasted like oranges and nostalgia. "Welcome," he finally said. "You're just in time for quiet hour." No one explained what the office did. Not that day. Not that week. All I knew was that every day had a rhythm. 8:11 a.m. Arrive. Tea is served. 9 a.m. to 10:17 a.m. The sorting. 10:17 a.m. to 11:03 a.m. Quiet hour. No talking, only thinking. 11:03 a.m. Noon. Shared notes. Noon, 1:11 p.m. Lunch. Always soup. Always delicious. 1:11 p.m. to 3:33 p.m. Independent inquiries. 3:33 p.m. to 4:44 p.m. Filing and whispering. 4:44 p.m. Home time. No clocks. You'll know. We weren't allowed to talk about what we did outside the office. Phones were left in a drawer by the door, gently wrapped in scarves like sleeping pets. But here's the thing, I never felt more useful, more needed. Some days, we deciphered handwritten letters in languages no one had heard of. Other days, we rearranged index cards with words like hope, leftovers, and midnight trains scribbled in beautiful calligraphy. Once, we helped a man remember the name of a song he'd only heard in a dream. He cried when we found it. And always, always, the work felt important. To be continued. Part 2. Filing the Impossible. After my first week, I was given a drawer. Not a desk, not a title, just a drawer. It was in a tall, ancient cabinet labeled simply miscellaneous. Important. The drawer didn't have a lock. It didn't need one. I was told to open it only when I felt it was time. Naturally, I tried to open it right away. It didn't budge. I sat with it for hours, sipping my Orangean nostalgia tea, watching the others work. I saw a woman with silver-streaked braids carefully stitch pages together with gold thread, and a man with 3 pairs of glasses balanced on his head as he read through a document upside down. A cat, no one knew its name, but it wore a bow tie, wandered among the desks and sometimes meowed pointedly at a stack of papers, as if approving their contents. Around 3:33 p.m., the drawer clicked. Inside, a single folder. The label read, "For Mr. Featherstone's memory, do not misplace." The folder contained a black and white photo of a man standing beside a tree that no longer exists. A concert ticket from 1962, faded but intact. A note, he doesn't remember the song, only the way it made him feel. That's the important part. A map with no place names, just rivers and weather patterns, drawn in soft watercolors. No instructions. I took it to Nora, one of the senior staff, who always wore mismatched earrings and smelled faintly of cinnamon and old leather. She glanced at the contents, then smiled wistfully. "Ah, Mr. Featherstone," she said. "It's time for a whisper filing." I learned that whisper filings were rare. You couldn't force them. They had to be done in the small room behind the fern labeled Hugo, where the walls were lined with shelves of soft fabric and silent wind chimes. You entered with the file. You whispered the contents. Slowly, gently, as if speaking to the memory itself. Then you left. No one explained what happened after. The folder would vanish. When I whispered Mr. Featherstone's story to the room, I didn't know why I felt tears. I didn't know the man, but somehow I missed him. Every week, new mysteries arrived. One Tuesday, we received a box full of unsent letters, all addressed to someone named Marigold with no return address. Each letter began with the words, "I'm sorry I disappeared." The handwriting changed from letter to letter. One was typed. One was written in crayon. One was just a page with a pressed flower and nothing else. We read each one aloud during shared notes. No one asked questions. At the end, they were placed in the fireplace, not to burn, but to rest. The fire never consumed them, only held them gently for a while before they vanished. I started dreaming differently. My sleep became filled with odd but comforting dreams, like playing chess with a grandmother I'd never met, or chasing after a train that never left the station, but always arrived exactly when I needed it to. Then came the man in the yellow sweater. He arrived on a Thursday. That alone was strange. We never had new people on Thursdays. Thursdays were for reflection and soup that made you think about childhood winters. He said his name was Julian, but the way he said it made it sound borrowed. He was cheerful, polite, and asked no questions. But every time he passed someone, they blinked, just once, a bit too slowly, like they had forgotten something important. I saw Nora forget her own name for a moment. I saw Hugo the fern curl slightly away from him. And when Julian passed my drawer, it clicked open again. Empty now. Just the faintest smell of cedar and a small crumpled sticky note inside. Do not let him near the room of things that never happened. That's when I realized something. This office, this peaceful, impossible place, it had rules. Unspoken ones. Soft ones. But rules nonetheless. And something had just broken one. To be continued. Part 3. The Room of Things That Never Happened. I didn't know where the room of things that never happened was. But I knew it was real. The office had places you didn't notice until you needed them. Rooms that weren't always there, or maybe they were, but only if you believed they should be. Like the closet of lost details, which only opened if you forgot why you came in the first place. Or the stairwell of repeated thoughts, a short flight of steps that always looped back to the same landing unless you hummed a tune no one else knew. So when I read that sticky note, "Do not let him near the room of things that never happened," I didn't ask anyone. I didn't point it out. I just watched Julian. He had a way of moving through the office like he already knew where things were. Not physically, exactly. He bumped into a lamp on his first day, but emotionally. He acted like he'd worked there before, but no one remembered him. Every afternoon, he filed papers that hadn't arrived yet. Literally. He'd write them before the courier brought them in, then smile and say, "Right on time." The pages matched, word for word, and yet he never smiled with his eyes. I asked Nora about him, casually. "Oh, Julian," she said, frowning slightly. "That's odd. I feel like we had this conversation already." "We didn't," I said. She tapped her mug twice on the desk, a little nervous tick most of us had picked up, then muttered, "He's been here before." "Sort of. Not quite. Maybe." I waited. She sighed. "There's a place, a room. It keeps things that almost happened. Things imagined, planned, or nearly real. We don't go there unless asked. And we never bring new staff near it. That room remembers. Remembers what? I asked. She looked at me. Really looked. Who we could have been. That night, I stayed late. Julian lingered too, pretending to file a memo that had no words on it. Around 6:09 p.m., I guessed, he took a left turn near the wall of clocks. Only, there are no clocks in the office. But I followed, and there it was. An unmarked wooden door behind the coat rack we never used. Faint music played from behind it, like a music box left out in the rain. The handle shimmered like warm copper. Julian reached for it. "Don't," I said, and my voice didn't feel like mine. He turned slowly. "You remember me, don't you?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure. I almost did. He smiled, softly, sadly. "They erased me once. Said I knew too much. But I just wanted to fix it. I only wanted to remember." Remember what? He looked down at his hands. My real name. I didn't report him. Not that day. Instead, I asked Nora for permission to access the room. I didn't expect her to say yes. But she looked at me for a long time, then whispered, "Bring tea. And don't stay long." The room was quiet. Quieter than quiet hour. Quieter than dreams. It was filled with mirrors, none of which showed your reflection. Only your could-have-beens. I saw myself, teaching in a school on a windy coast, painting huge canvases in a greenhouse, holding a dog I never owned but clearly loved, laughing with someone whose face I couldn't quite see. One mirror showed me in Julian's sweater. Another showed him in mine. He wasn't lying. He had worked here before, maybe more than once. But each time, the office had unwritten him. When I left the room, my tea was still warm, but my hands were shaking. The mirrors hadn't just shown my paths, they'd shown ours. And I finally understood. The office wasn't just about filing the world's memories. It was about keeping balance between what was, what is, and what might have been. Julian was tipping it, and it was up to me to decide whether to let him finish what he started, or help him forget again. To be continued. Part 4, The Archive That Doesn't Exist. The next morning, the air in the office felt denser, like rain was about to fall, but inside your soul. Hugo the fern was drooping ever so slightly, and even the cat, normally aloof and smug, sat quietly on my desk, tail wrapped around its feet, staring toward the west wall. A wall that yesterday had been a bookshelf, and today wasn't there at all. In its place was a door I'd never seen. A heavy one, painted the color of old memory. No knob, no sign, just the feeling of waiting. Nora approached without speaking. She handed me a folded piece of parchment. On the outside, in case you choose to remember. Inside, the archive that doesn't exist is not for reading. It is for listening, and it will only speak if you already know what it will say. Filed by Julian, before. That's when I knew. Julian hadn't just worked here. He had been one of them, the originals. The first filers. I found Julian that afternoon reorganizing a filing cabinet full of emotions. The labels were odd. First rain while missing someone. That feeling when you almost say, "I love you," but don't. The last time you were the first to wake up on a holiday. I asked him, "Why did you leave?" He smiled faintly. I didn't. I was unfiled. He placed a file into the regret, quiet, not loud drawer. I asked too many questions. I tried to do too much. This place, it exists because of what we don't fix. The almosts, the maybes, the soft edges of time. You wanted to make it sharper, I said. He nodded. I thought if I could just remember everything, I'd understand. But the office doesn't like clarity. It likes possibility. I threatened that. So it shelved me. And now I remember the wrong things. Later, during quiet hour, I returned to the door that replaced the bookshelf. I pressed my hand against it. It was warm. I thought about everything I hadn't done in life. Everything I'd started and left halfway. All the things I wished I could undo, or redo, or relive just to hold them a moment longer. The door opened. Inside, a room made of soft whispers and candlelight. A single desk with a phonograph spinning nothing. No files. No paper. Just sound. At first, I heard nothing. Then, a voice. My voice. Telling a story I didn't remember ever speaking aloud. When I was 9, I buried a notebook in the woods. I said it was a time capsule, but really, I hoped someone would find it and understand me. It had poems about clouds and a letter to a girl I'd never meet. I staggered back. More voices. Versions of me from timelines that had never solidified. Telling truths I never lived. Laughing with friends I never met. Saying things I'd only ever almost said. It was overwhelming. Beautiful. Like being hugged by versions of yourself you forgot to become. And in the center of the room, hanging in the air like a mobile, was a note. To forget is a mercy. To remember is a risk. Choose gently. I left the room with tears I didn't know I'd been carrying. That evening, I found Julian standing by the window, watching nothing. I know who you were, I said softly. He didn't turn. Then you know what I could have been. You still can. He shook his head. No, not now. I've seen too many paths. I don't belong to one anymore. We stood in silence for a while. Finally, he turned to me. You could take my place. What do you mean? You understand the silence. You don't need the answers to do the work. I laughed, almost sadly. I'm not ready. No one is. That's why we're chosen. Not for readiness, for willingness. He handed me a single page from a typewriter. The office continues. Always. Through the ones who stay. Then he walked toward the bookshelf that used to be a door, which was now just a blank wall again. He placed his hand against it. And faded. Not dramatically. Not tragically. Just softly. Like a thought you meant to hold on to but let go of, because it was time. When I returned to my desk, there was a note. Not signed. You're due for a drawer of your own. Bottom left. Take your time. It opens when you're ready. I haven't opened it yet, but I will. Someday. To be continued. Part 5. The drawer at the end of the hall. I waited 3 days before opening the drawer. Not because I was afraid, though maybe I was, but because I wanted the moment to feel earned. There's a quiet dignity in hesitation, in giving something the space to arrive fully. And in the office of remembered and almost things, time always waited with you. When I finally pulled it open, the drawer slid smoothly, like it had been waiting for years. Inside, I found 3 objects. A matchbox with no matches, only soft ash and the scent of pine. A paper crane folded from a page of a book I'd never read but somehow missed. A blank envelope labeled, "For the last letter you never sent." Beneath them was a file. My name on the tab. Inside, memories. Not mine alone. Versions of me across almost lives. Small, quiet echoes. Me helping a stranger on a train who never spoke, but smiled like it changed their day. Me choosing to stay instead of walk away. Me making tea for a grieving friend, saying nothing, because silence was enough. None of them dramatic, none of them heroic, but all of them true in some way. And a note. You filed many things, but this is your own. File it gently, then close the drawer. You've become part of the architecture now. The office didn't change after that. Not really. There were still clocks that didn't tick. Still a kettle that always boiled when you needed comfort. Still Hugo the fern, who was starting to bloom something that looked suspiciously like a memory. But something in me changed. I started seeing the stories in the pages more clearly. Not just words, but traces. The sigh between paragraphs. The hesitation in a signature. The way a name was written with longing or relief. And others began asking me things. Is this ready to be whispered? Do you think this moment matters? Should this be forgotten or remembered differently? I never gave them answers, only questions that helped them find their own. One rainy Thursday, a new staff member arrived. He looked uncertain, a little lost, exactly how I had once looked. I offered him tea, nostalgia with a hint of mint. He smiled. Then he asked the question I had once asked. So, what exactly is this place? I paused, just as Nora once had, then answered with the only truth that ever mattered. It's where things go when they're too important to forget, but too gentle to hold loudly. Sometimes, late at night, I walk past the place where the room of things that never happened used to be. The wall is solid now. No music. No whispers, only the faint sense that something kind still lingers there, like the warmth of a lamp recently turned off. And sometimes, when I pass a mirror, I see Julian, just for a second, smiling, not as someone who was lost, but someone who was finally filed. The end.